So, hey everybody, we have Katelyn Bourgoin. I am a huge fan of Kate. I discovered 3 years ago her content, and since then I'm a fan. For people who don't know you, could you give us a little bit background? And I know that you started a startup that actually failed. So I would love to
Yeah.
learn. And you made your own. The agency is based on those learnings. So I'd love to know about that.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here. A lot of what I do today is based on making lots of mistakes. And I'd rather make the mistakes and have other people learn from them than have them make the same ones themselves. So we're all going to make mistakes, but maybe you can learn from some of mine today. So a little bit of my background. I had a branding and PR agency. That was my first business. And within 2 years of that, launched a restaurant consulting company, and we did all the branding and PR for the restaurants. Ended up selling the restaurant and consulting company a couple of years later, and looking at how I wanted to grow the agency. And I was like, I'm tired of exchanging hours for dollars. I want to do something different, something bigger. And I had this idea for an app. And I was like, how hard can launching an app be, right? Well, it turns out very hard. The launching it part, not so hard. The building the right thing and then being able to make sure that people stuck around and used the product and that it was creating the value that we delivered. That part was hard. So we raised a bunch of venture capital. Things were looking good from the outside and feeling really bad on the inside. We were being called the next LinkedIn for women by Forbes and Inc. magazine. And meanwhile, I'm having anxiety attacks every 2 weeks, being like, this is not working. We were good at acquiring users because I have a marketing background. So getting people to discover us, we were pretty good at that. We hadn't built the right solution. We had built something that we thought was going to be the right solution, but we really didn't understand what our users' job to be done was. We were focused more on who they were and what we wanted to create. And so fast forward to closing down that business, and I was contacted by one of our venture capitalists, and they said, hey, you were really good on the marketing side, not so good on the product side. We've got a bunch of teams that have built incredible products and are having a hard time having people discover them. Can you help them out? And I was like, absolutely, because I am broke and I need some money. So yes. So I started working with all of these amazing teams. Brilliant innovators, had built things that were being used by Tesla or SpaceX, just cool stuff. And I would sit down at the boardroom table with them and I'd ask them the question that every marketer needs to know, which is, tell me about your customers. And it was surprising to me how often I couldn't get a very clear answer from them. So I'd often be told something we target, companies that are between 10 and 500 employees who sell stuff on the internet. And I was like, that's everybody. That's not a market. That's just basically everybody. Or the founding team would have kind of a competition, even at the table, they'd be like, well, we're going after this audience. And somebody else would perk up and go, yeah, but also this one's important. And it was clear to me that there wasn't a lot of focus on really, really understanding the customer that they were building for. And I was like, how big a problem can this be? And I reached out on Twitter and I asked other marketers and freelance copywriters. And I said, when you first start working with a new client, how often do they need help figuring out who their best buyers are? And it came back that it was something I think it was not 87% of the time they start working with a client, they just don't know who their best buyers are or why those people buy. So that became my obsession. I started reading everything I could, learning as much as I could. I discovered Jobs to Be Done, which is an innovation framework that really shapes a lot of the work that I do today. And I started, funny enough, initially working with product teams and helping them to try to figure out how to validate and understand their audience so they could build the right product. And quickly realized that a lot of those teams had the same hubris that I had when they went into building product, which is they weren't so worried about understanding their customer because they knew what they were building. They felt very confident that it was going to turn out great. It wasn't until they launched that product, got it out into the world and realized, oh crap, nobody seems to want this thing. We need to start marketing it better, that they would start paying attention. And so, that shifted our focus at Customer Camp away from helping teams to better understand buyers so that they could build better products to helping them to market better by understanding buyers. It's kind of like a Trojan horse, because at the end of the day, the more you understand your customers, it's going to help you in all facets of your business. But we're hyper focused on the marketing piece because that's the most painful piece for a lot of businesses. So that's how I got to where I am here today. And it's, my obsession is just help more teams to spend the time and energy to better understand buyers, because at the end of the day, it takes time, but it will save them so much time and tears later.
Yeah, yeah. Your story made me realize that I was also going through the same. So my one startup failed, the other startup was like did okay, but we were in a very different situation, to be honest. Like we were working on a GDPR product,
Mm-hmm.
and GDPR was kind of a regulation, not kind of a need of the
Mm-hmm.
market. And I always had this fake signal that said, maybe we are not building, because our customer didn't know what they really wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and they did not even know what, like, they just, there was a law came and they want to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for entrepreneurs or people who are still building, who listen to my podcast, like, how do you figure out that signal, that like it's that fake signal, that it's going to work, it's not working or not working,
Mm-hmm.
before even jumping into like the whole customer and understanding research part?
It's really hard. And I would say that, and when I first started doing this work, I hoped that there was a clear cut answer to that, right? I hoped that if you spent the time doing your upfront research, if you understand jobs to be done and you are going to like interview people and try to pull out what are the jobs, what are their triggers, like that you could somehow leapfrog all the false starts and mistakes and like get to the right place right away. And the truth is that it is a journey. It's this ongoing thing. So you want to start smarter and you want to learn as much as you can about the problem that you're going to help people solve and their understanding of that problem. And you want to, if you follow kind of jobs to be done for anybody who's listening who's not familiar with jobs to be done, kind of a big concept, but to explain it simply, we don't buy products just because we wake up one day and just buy something. We buy products because something happens in our life that makes us realize we have a job to do. And then we will start noticing and searching for products to help us get that job done. And when we are considering products, we are essentially hiring them to do the job for us. And we have all these criteria that are going on in our heads as consumers or as buyers. There's functional things that we need the product to be able to do. There's, we want the product to make us feel a particular way. We want to be, there's social elements, like how will other people look at us if we use this product, right? You can tell with like everything that's happening in the crypto world with NFTs. Guess why people are buying NFTs? Is it because they're the biggest art fans ever? Not necessarily. It's because they want to have that Twitter profile that shows that they just dropped 30 grand on a PNG and signals to other people that they are kind of like part of this community and like that they are successful. And like, so there's all these social things that go into products as well. The idea of jobs theory or jobs to be done is when you learn from your customers, you can understand what is the job, what's all the functional stuff that matters, the social stuff, the emotional stuff, and you can hopefully design products that do a better job. And in your customer's mind, they're either going to, hire your product and they're going to be excited, they're going to keep using it, they're going to tell people about it if it gets their job done. And if it doesn't, or if their context changes, then they're going to fire your product and look for something new to hire. So that's kind of like the high level idea of the framework. Now, what I would say is that when you are going out and you're learning from customers and you're in product kind of like discovery mode, you're trying to figure out what the right problem is to solve and if you're building the right features. A lot of that, you can do a lot of great work before you write a line of code or before you start building, but it's not the chances of you nailing it and not having to do anything else and then being like, we 100% killed it, this is exactly right, not very high, right? Like there's always going to be learning. It's an ongoing process, which is why you want to consistently be learning from customers. You want to consistently be learning from them to improve your product and also to improve how you talk about your product so that they know why they should care. And of course, how you market your product so that they discover you and want to try you. So again, it's like this ongoing understanding of like your customer, but not from the perspective of my customer are like women that are 36 years old who like live in cities, but like what is it they're trying to get done? What progress are they trying to make? What other things have they tried that haven't worked and why? That's all the stuff you want to know. You want to really understand their job.
Yeah. So as a marketer, I just want to have this. I wanted to ask this question anyway. Um, when I try to write a copy as a marketer, there's a jobs to be done framework that I can pick up and do the copy, and there is this outcome led one, which is like, hey, what is the promised world would look like, right? And promised land would look like, and then there is like benefit led, right? So when you write for a copy, and I know you have an amazing copywriting skills when I see your website as well. How do you decide to use which copy to? I mean, they're all very similar, but has a little bit different. And I always get stuck here, like, should I use which framework should I use to write the copy?
Good question. What I would say is that, again, it's not a very, like, it's not the answer that you want me to give you, but the frameworks probably are going to be really helpful. But there's not one right answer. And oftentimes it's about tweaking and, putting something out there and testing how your market responds to it. So, whether you're using kind of like the outcome driven framework or the benefits driven framework or the job focused framework, like those, really what it comes down to is, let's talk about like the first kind of like copy that matters, right? Like it's that value proposition on your website. Like when somebody first comes to your website and they have discovered you, you want to give them in the first couple of seconds something that makes them go, okay, I want to stay here and I want to learn more, right? It doesn't need to sell them. They shouldn't be able to like be like, okay, it's sold and like click a buy button, right? But it's like, there's something meaningful here for me and I want to learn more. And one of the reasons why people create landing pages, as opposed to just having, one website and sending all their traffic there, is because different people who are coming in from different places with different contexts are going to want to hear different messages. And that's, again, where when you understand your different buyers and you understand the context of their situation, there may not be that one perfect message for everyone. There's probably a great message you can come up with that's going to be the dominant one. But oftentimes it's like the thing that actually like will motivate people. It's going to be different depending on their context. So experiment, use products that allow you to like A/B test. A really cool product that is new to market. It's targeted towards B2B SaaS, but Winter is a cool new product. I like Winter. I think that Winter's, interestingly, I'm kind of like following their journey as a marketer and like as a researcher. And like, I think that they're trying to position themselves as like a replacement for like surveys or like, customer interviews. I don't think that they're a replacement. I don't think anything can replace customer interviews. But I think that they are probably a really cool tool to test a message without having to, have a lot of traffic or without having to pay a bunch of money for ads to get your message in front of a big audience. I think that you'll probably get some cool insights from there. So I would say, it's this kind of like evolution, and think of it that way. And well, as marketers, we love to market to each other and be like, increase your conversion 6x with this one change, right? Like that's nice. It's really compelling and like attractive to like hope that that's true. But oftentimes there isn't one framework. There isn't one approach to writing a hook that is always going to win. It's about learning from customers and putting stuff out in front of them and seeing how they respond and then improving. And it's iterative. It's testing.
Got it. So let's hop into the famous thread you recently released about 4 questions that you really need to answer to get started. And it was about BarkBox. So take us through the journey.
Yeah.
How did you figure it out, and what was the eventual result out of it?
Yeah. So let me to back up a little bit. I've been in this world now trying to help companies to better understand why people buy and to action that in their marketing for several years. And one of the things that we as creative people are really good at doing is we're really good at like coming up with stuff that looks brilliant, but we can't actually explain to people how we did it because it's happening. Like there's all this stuff going on in our brain, all this context and years of knowledge and like, reading and like copywriting. Like, it's not easy to just look at something that we do that works and be like, here's exactly why that worked. So I was like, I'm going to reverse engineer the way that I think about marketing. and try to wrap that in a framework so that other people can like get there faster who haven't spent the last 11 years obsessing about this stuff, right? And so the idea behind the trigger technique, which is essentially just a framework for turning customer stories into great marketing ideas, is it builds on the key stuff. I think that people get so overwhelmed by market research because they don't know what's important and they think they need to take note of everything. And they then have all this information that's like, oh, this is so cool. But it's like, what the heck do I do with any of this, right? How do I action it? And so I kept hearing that challenge from people. They would gather insight and they didn't know what was obviously actionable, or they needed to share with their team so that they could convince their client or the rest of their team that this is an approach that they wanted to take. And they would spend all this time trying to take like kind of like what they'd learned and communicate it in a compelling way with other people so they could get stakeholders on board with their strategy. So this was the idea behind this trigger technique. It was like, I want to give people a framework that they can use over and over to generate better ideas. And I want to make it really easy for them to share those ideas with people who matter, whether that be their clients or their team. And so the 4 questions, I basically broke it down as like, what are the most important things? If you do an interview with a buyer, there's going to be so much good stuff. How do you create this? What's the signal and what's the noise? What do you have to like make note of and what's less important? And I was like, okay, well, the most important stuff if you're trying to market smarter is, well, what was the buying trigger? What made that person begin the buying journey in the first place and start to be open to potentially buying something? Because again, like we don't just wake up one day ready to buy something. Something happens in our world that opens us up to wanting to buy it. And there can be multiple triggers, you know, in a buying journey. Somebody can experience a trigger and kind of try a couple things, and one of those kind of works, and then something changes in their life, that there's this another trigger, now they need to look for something else. So I was like, okay, what's the buying trigger? What job are they trying to get done? What are their pains with other solutions? And this one's really important because it's cool from a marketing perspective, because of course, if you understand what else they're trying and why it's not working, you can create great messaging. But if you understand what else they're trying, you can also try to get in front of people sooner before they start looking for a product like yours. And if you're in a really competitive category, which most marketers are, then that's a big deal, right? Like when you think about like Casper, the mattress company, like if you Google Casper, you're going to see 6 ads, all from their competitors telling you why you should buy their mattress instead of Casper's, right? And if you put bed in a box, you're going to see 6 ads from competitors. Casper's spending an enormous amount of money, even though they were the first bed in a box to come to market. They have to spend an enormous amount of money now to defend themselves in this crowded category. So if you understand what people try before they start looking for a Casper mattress or before they start looking for a bed in the box, you can get in front of people sooner. And like in Casper's case, they realized that some people were getting triggered to begin the buying journey because they got a dog and that dog was sleeping in bed with them. So if you Google how a dog decides where to sleep, Casper comes up number 3 on a blog post that they wrote, comes up number 3 in Google searches. None of the other bed in a box companies are targeting those keywords, right? There's no ads. They're not competing against ads. It's just their organic content number 3. So understanding what else people are trying, as in they're searching for ways to help their dog sleep somewhere, is really great insight for getting in front of people sooner by finding other channels. So yeah, like what are their pains with their solutions? And then what are their selfish desires, right? We all buy things because we want to look smarter to other people and we want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel less stressed. Like that stuff is really important from a marketing perspective. So those are the 4 cornerstone insights. When you gather those, and you can gather all of those through one customer interview, right? When you gather all of those, you now have the kind of like key ingredients you need to generate some really great, highly targeted ideas from a marketing perspective. Will all of your ideas work? Of course not, right? Like you have to go out, you have to test stuff. But I call it trigger testing, because instead of just testing channels or testing audiences, what you're really looking at is testing, when might somebody be interested in buying a solution like mine? Once you've got the kind of like 4 cornerstone insights, you can identify potential target markets. You can identify moments where those what I call target moments, where those people might be open to an offer like yours. you can improve your promise, your core message in that campaign, and you can improve your call to action. So that's the trigger technique kind of in a nutshell. I won't walk through the whole kind of like BarkBox example because I think that people can go and check it out on Twitter if they want. But like what I'll say is that like for most products, there are going to be multiple trigger events. There's going to be multiple target markets you could go after. The goal here is to help you more quickly create campaigns that have a higher chance of being successful. So you can then double down on the stuff that's working and keep doing more of that. Because that's all that marketing is, right? It's like trying things that are from a smart perspective and then finding what's resonating with the market and doing more of it. It's hard to find the things that are working, but once you find those things, like it's easy to go, okay, we're going to do this and this and this. And then that's when the fun part starts.
Thank you for explaining that, first of all. And I will link your Twitter thread in the show notes. I actually took that Twitter thread and did an interview.
Did you?
Okay. And this is, yeah, I did. And I tried to ask them like what made them think about something like, my recent company called Synthesis. It's like it's a school that is gaming plus learning. It's like a new kind of a category in e-learning. And so like, what made you think to go and buy something like Elon Musk schools, which is Synthesis? And when I learned, it made me realize this customer was 2.5 years learning about that problem before coming to us. Okay, so she actually read a book about somebody. His name is Dr. Neufeld, and what he was doing, he was teaching in the book that how parents can make kids raise better in terms of better humans. And when she read it, there was an insight that you need to give kids a playtime. And she was already homeschooling, so she was already sold on homeschooling. Our main customers come from the homeschooling market, and she said, I don't agree with the existing system. So she was not agreeing with the existing system. She already was homeschooling, and she read this book, which gave us insight. Yeah, I need to give my kids a playtime. And Synthesis actually is like a game that you play every week to think critically together and solve problems together and collaborate together, and like be more empathetic to your friends who are playing together with you, and then you enjoy. It's like a new kind of a sports in school, I would say. So
genius. I mean, I love that. Like, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm so excited. Like, playtime were you talking about yourself as a playtime thing before that? Like, was that kind of like, did you think of like your competition set being like the kid upstairs playing with blocks by themselves versus like this like family playtime? Like, it just seems like that's a cool framing that is maybe I don't think I would have intuitively, if I were you, known that that's what we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It gave me such a good insight that the kids need playtime, and that playtime could be Synthesis.
Yes.
Right? You need to give them that place to actually exercise and use those skills, and basically just be excited about something every weekend. But her journey started so like 2.5-3 years ago. It's so hard for me to like, so we are anyway creating a new category, and when you create a new category, you need to anyway educate people. And so what I thought about, hey, instead of me creating that content, educating them right now, why not just go to the source who taught them and then run some kind of a webinar with them and then
right?
teach them.
Who are the experts?
So
but the interesting thing is you say that you're creating a new category. Are you like, this is like, I'm sure you follow April Dunford because like she's brilliant, and Louis Grenier does a lot of content on this too that is really good. But like, do you need to create a new category, or for now, can you position your product in a category that they're already familiar with, like playtime, right? Like, like that's, if this is another way of doing playtime, it's an innovation on playtime, but do you need to like educate them on like this new category you're creating, or can you position your product inside it of something that they might already know about and then help educate them on the importance of playtime? And like a lot of them are probably, I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions here as a new parent, but like, there's probably this like challenge when you think about like what are their pains with other solutions. Parents probably have this kind of like tug of war they're doing internally around screen time and family time, right? It's like family time, if it's going to be good family time, it shouldn't be screen time. But maybe there's part of this process is like around educating and creating awareness that you can have, that you can combine both without them having to feel guilty, right? Like, yeah, it's an app that you're doing with your kid instead of like playing a board game, but like your kid's enjoying it, they're learning. Isn't that more important than like you like fighting them to play Monopoly with you, even though they want to play Minecraft? Like, isn't this a better solution?
Yeah, yeah. So just answering those questions, April actually came to the podcast
Mm-hmm.
herself, and I'm a big fan of Ruiz radically standing out
Mm-hmm.
concept as well. And I am definitely studying Christopher Lockett. I'm not sure if you know him.
No, I love
Um,
discovering new
so
people.
he's the category designer guy. So there's this book he released called Play Bigger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about like, so since we are creating a new category, either, so just like, Salesforce creating a category, like there's no software,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they are dominating still after like, I think,
Mm-hmm.
21 years
Yeah,
since they
they're
started, right?
so
And
entrenched.
so it's about like starting that education program earlier. If you create a category and if you win the category, then so the long term play is category.
Mm-hmm.
But right now what I'm doing at a tactical level is that I see a lot of Google searches on learning games for kids,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm placing the product into learning games for kids,
Mm-hmm.
and like, or like academic games for kids, and like making them try the product. I have to be honest with you, I have placed myself in the context of the customer, but customer didn't convert in
Mm-hmm.
terms of paying customer. They
Mm-hmm.
converted into the lead but didn't convert into the paying
Mm-hmm.
customer. So we turned off that specific search, because nobody's searching for something like this on the internet.
No.
Like, they're not thinking, oh, I want my kids to think critically through a game.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want my kids to be prepared for the future,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to play a game to be prepared for the future,
Yeah.
right? And so, and then the framework comes in like, hey, if people are not searching, you have to go and like on social and like get their attention, and
Mm-hmm.
then bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
So far for us, Twitter worked really
Well,
well as an
I'll
organic.
challenge you there and I'll say that they aren't potentially searching for a solution like yours. But again, with like the whole Casper example of like how dogs decide to sleep, before anybody knows that they might want a bed in a box, because that wasn't something anybody knew to look for. Maybe they were looking for beds, but I bet you people are searching for things like, like educational activities to do as a family, right? Like they might be doing things like that. And that's still like, you could be a great solution for that. So I would wonder about is like when it does come to the intent, like the intent is there. Maybe they're following like Instagram, like mommy Instagrammers who are all about like raising brainy babies, right? So like they are searching. They're searching for solutions to help them raise smart, thoughtful children. They are not looking for an app for that, but they're looking for that because they're following people like that. So
Yeah, yeah,
I would
for sure.
open up that kind of like in thinking, when you think about intent, don't think about just your specific product, but think about other ways they might get that job done, because those are great channels for you and those are great partners for you.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to run some search ads on jobs to be
Mm-hmm.
done. So like critical thinking for kids,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or like today I just done an ad on Zoom games for kids, because the game happens on Zoom.
Right.
So like there is some search volume,
Mm-hmm.
but learning games for kid was like the highest one that I could leverage, and it didn't work out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like constantly testing and iterating and finding out
Yeah.
what fits. So that's what I'm doing on search. But I think the people would who have this, we all as kids, I remember, I'm pretty sure you as well, when you were growing up as a marketeer, or when you're growing up as a kid in, and you were like, hey, school doesn't actually make sense, I'm not using it in practical life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think we all have that thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using that thought that school is not enough,
Yeah.
and it's not preparing me for the real life, and then trying to put them on social, so people who relate to this thought
Mm-hmm.
can actually start thinking about something like
Love
this.
it. Can I just give you
So
some ideas? One of the things from becoming a parent that I realized very, very quickly, I don't know if I've had this experience in any other kind of like trigger event in my life. Becoming a parent was a massive trigger event, and it's created this cascade of decisions that I've made ever since then. But one thing that I've noticed to be incredibly true, and this, I'm sure that you already know this, but to kind of like think through the opportunities, is that parents trust other parents, right? Like they are their biggest sources of influence. Like they ask other parents, they ask parents in their network, they join, women, a lot of women join like Facebook groups for moms. Like there's all of these different kind of like ways that parents get information from other parents and like who their sources of influence are. And I would wonder too, like you talk about like, a lot of what's being learned in schools, it's like, this is what the curriculum is. So teachers are teaching to the curriculum, but even teachers, a lot of my friends are teachers. They recognize there's big gaps in what's being taught. So like, are there ways that you can find those influencers, which are going to be teachers and other parents, and look for those people to help you in sharing this message versus looking for like who's searching Google for like, critical thinking games? They're probably not. They're probably asking their friends that they go for walks with their strollers, or they're asking their kid's teacher. So is there ways you can start forming some of those relationships?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, this is my next like tactic that I'm planning to run. Just to be honest, like, so we have a competitor called, it's a Udemy for kids. I'm not naming them. And I was just listening to their podcast today, and they exactly did that when they started being this marketplace for kids to learn. And so they went through the influencer route, these Facebook group route. And I do think that would actually work. But like, to be honest, like the company had money and they said, hey, we have money, let's try what is out there first. And then because going to influencers, like, okay, it takes like 30 days to 90 days to actually get that up and running and see what's the result out of it. But running paid ads is like, okay, running paid ads, see how it's working out. So.
It's so, and this is the thing, and I battle with this as well. And like, I think that all marketers do. Like, there's something so attractive and exciting about scalable marketing campaigns, right? Like, it's like, okay, what if it works? We just pour in more money and it just keeps working. But especially in the beginning, it's like you got to do a lot of stuff that doesn't scale to be able to find the things that are working, and then you can pour more money in the engine. It's like, but if you try to go right to the scalable tactics, oftentimes you may get disappointed because things don't work as well as you'd hoped. And it's like a lot of hand-to-hand combat, a lot of conversations, a lot of like, being on other people's podcasts, like just doing stuff that won't necessarily scale. But when you look at the trigger technique framework, it can help you make sure that rather than just like kind of like blasting everywhere and anywhere you could get in front of like, somebody, that you do think thoughtfully about the things that you choose to do. But a lot of them probably still are not going to be super scalable in the beginning. It's going to be a lot of like relationship building and trust building and figuring out what does work and then being able to do more and more of it.
Got it. Cool. So, I'm going to go back and do unscalable stuff and report to you back how that goes out. And I know that will actually work. So with the BarkBox thing, did you see any result coming back to the story and see like those questions actually made an impact at the end?
So what I'll share is that the questions those 4 questions that you want to answer, those aren't necessarily the exact questions you're going to ask, right? You're not like you...
Exactly. That was the question as well. Because those questions, what triggered you to buy? Like, why are you
people don't answer questions like that because they don't know. So you need to kind of like pull it out of them. And of course, I've learned the way that I interview, a huge influence of mine has been Bob Moesta. He's one of the original architects of Jobs to be Done. But he talks about it with this, he thinks the way he talks about it is almost like you're filming a documentary when you talk to them, and you want to like ask them questions to get them to kind of like set the scene and remember all the details, because our memories are imperfect and we can't just out of the blue often answer a question like, well, what triggered you to buy? But we can answer a question of like, okay, so tell me about like, when did you first start thinking that this might be a problem for you? And then they'll kind of think a little bit and they'll remember like, well, it was around this. And oftentimes as they start sharing their story, when you learn to be a good interviewer, and I have a product actually that helps people with running interviews called the Clarity Call Cheat Sheets, where I have like a script and you can run through it and it's got like your 10 starter questions. But as I say with that product, and I give examples of interviews that we've run so you can watch it being done, as you get good at this, you're not using a script. Like you're very much fluidly just having this conversation. You're learning to listen for things and kind of know where to drill in and ask like a follow-up question, because people are not databases. We can't just pull up information on request. Like we often need a little bit of help to fill in the memory and to ask us kind of some relating stuff around it. And people that are really good at this are like, criminal investigators. Like they're really good at like helping people to like pull up memories and details. So I'd say you don't just ask those 4 questions and think that somebody's going to off the bat like rattle off 4 perfect answers, because it doesn't work that way. It's about having a dialogue and having a conversation, kind of like pulling it out of them. The other thing is that the BarkBox interview example, that was an interview that I did in one of my workshops to showcase how to do this. It wasn't something I did specifically for BarkBox as a client. So I haven't actually worked with BarkBox. I just wanted to show that example because I was like, everybody's going to resonate with this example. It's a product that most people can be familiar with. And there was, again, some great stuff that came out of that interview. But I am working on a blog post right now where it's like a real interview that I did with one of the people who bought our Clarity Call cheat sheets. And the blog post itself is going to be a trigger test. So one of the things that I've learned from doing lots of interviews with people who bought our cheat sheets is that before they start thinking about, oh, I need to interview customers to learn from them, or I need to interview my clients' customers so I can better understand them, they often have the exact same trigger moment. And it's super common. They either start working with a client or they get hired on a team and they get on the inside and they think that things are going to be great. And then they go, holy crap, this client does not know who their audience is, or they're all over the place. And they start to stress out because oftentimes the client didn't have budget for them to go off and do a bunch of foundational research, or the team wants them to just get started and like start marketing. And so they, at that point, will often look for a persona template that they're going to fill out with the client or with their team to kind of give them their bearings and start there. And so I know that a persona template is another solution that marketers are using to try to get in front of people sooner. And I also know that persona templates that are full of kind of guesses from key stakeholders are not the best at actually getting any information. So I'm working on a blog post that I'll do some paid traffic to, all about. It's called Fuck Personas, use trigger tests to get in front of your buyers sooner. And so that will be an experiment testing this insight that we know about why people buy, which is they first start looking for a persona, sit down with the client and fill out the persona and realize they're really not much farther ahead. So I want to educate them on that with this post. So it's again, it's about like figuring out like, what are these pieces? What are those kind of 4 cornerstone insights? And then this is where as marketers, we get to be really creative and putting those together in different ways to come up with campaign ideas.
Yeah. So I personally struggle with the persona myself. I'm like, okay, who's a persona? And like, okay, this guy is a product manager. Sure. But like, he's not at all a persona, although he's a product manager, because, he's at the early stage of his career trying to learn. And then he's like trying a product as well, but he's not actually persona. So really looking forward to the persona template. So let's move into the rapid fire round. And this is something I try to learn from your mindset. Not sure maybe if you have one, but like, who's your favorite growth marketer?
Oh, there's so many people that are fantastic. I would say right now, my personal favorites, and I don't think they would call themselves a growth marketer. I think they'd probably actually like sneer at that, but would probably be like Louis Grenier. Like, I love a lot of what he's doing right now. I think he's really nailing it with like identifying a pain point and creating some great content around it. Also, Corey, yeah, he's doing some fantastic stuff. I love following him. Amanda Navidad, again, I don't know that she would call herself a growth marketer. She's definitely more on the content side, but she's like, I think that she's just brilliant, and she's a great example of how doing smart content leads to results. Like, she's showing it every day. So like, those are 3 of my top favorites.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite marketers as well, to be honest. And like, Amanda's coming in January. Corey already been there. Awesome. Louis is pending for 1 year. Whenever he has time,
he's really focused on baby life, which is a good thing to do.
Yeah. Cool. What's the one bad piece of advice you've got in your career that you would say, okay, don't do that?
I've had lots of bad pieces of advice. I think one thing is like, fail fast. I think I remember when I was building my startup, like I think that what the fail fast is like the meaning behind it is good, but the way that I interpreted it was like, oh, I can just throw shit out there and see what happens, and I'll like I'll just fail. Like I'm not just like guessing, I'm failing fast. Like, and so I would say that is I think really tempting for people like ourselves who are product people, but we're also like nerdy about marketing. Like it gives us like basically it gives us a like the license to go out there and just try shit. And while you need to experiment, you absolutely need to experiment. It should be based on insight. It should be based on like trying to understand the customer. It shouldn't just be like, I'm going to throw stuff out there and see what works. And I'm just failing fast. Like I'm growth hacking. Like I think that advice is really tempting to take, and it lets you justify not doing some of the foundational work because you're just failing fast. So I'd say that advice.
Yeah, yeah. Last question, second last actually. What have you recently changed your mind about?
I'm changing my mind about stuff all the time.
That's
I
good because if you're not changing your mind, you're not learning, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've changed my mind about is when I first started doing the work that I do today. Whether I was doing it for clients, I was doing it internally around helping them to understand their customers through customer interviews. I had this belief that you needed to, if you were going to really build your strategic kind of like focus on customer insight, that you needed to gather a lot of intel. So I thought you needed to, interview 20 different customers, then follow up with like, surveys that are segmented, and like that you had to gather all this intel because that would mean that you were right. And that's the way that I was doing it internally, and that's the way that I was doing it for clients. And the problem with that method is that it takes a long time. And a lot of companies don't have a long time. It can take anywhere up to 8 weeks from the beginning of a project to like delivering insight. And that's a lot. That's a lifetime, especially for startups. And it doesn't always like, I think that where I've kind of like switched gears is like, you don't need a lot of insight to make decisions, as long as the decisions that you're making are going to be ones that the goal is to learn and to improve incrementally, versus like we're putting our foot, like, we're putting a flag in the ground and we're going to spend $2 million in ad spend based on like these insights. Like if that's what you're doing, go out and do a lot more research up front. But if you are again in that stage of like, we haven't really figured out the right message, we're still testing audiences, we're still trying to decide which channels we really want to invest in, I don't think you need to do a lot of insight gathering up front. I think it's tempting to do it and it feels good to do it because it feels like you're coming from a smarter place, but it can often become a project that then when it's done, you're like, I put so much effort into that, and like I feel like I need to like that. You can get this sunk cost fallacy, I guess, about it. So like what I'm now seeing is that like if people have the right thought framework, they can learn faster and implement faster. And even if they're not necessarily going to hit the bullseye every time, at least it will feel better to them and they're more likely to do it, which is important. Because like you can learn the best way to go out and gather customer insight, but if it's so arduous and time consuming that you never have time to do it, you're not going to do it. So it doesn't matter that you know the best way to do it, right? So I guess it's like, to summarize that in a much more concise way, it's like theory and like best practices are great, but in the real world, we're all getting like stalked by like a polar bear who wants to eat us, which is like, the need to make money or the need to hit numbers. And so best practices, well, awesome, are not always effective. And so there's got to be kind of like a duct tape solution in the short term so that you can get to the next stage.
Got it. Got it. Last question. Why picking a niche is a bad idea?
I don't think picking a niche is a bad idea. I think that picking a niche can be a brilliant idea, but I think it needs to be based on understanding not just the characteristics of that audience or their attributes, but instead understanding what it is they're trying to get done. So, for instance, a friend of mine has a company called Proposify, and they help people make proposal software. And everybody uses proposals in the business world, right? Like whether you're a small web design agency or you're you're building a new condominium or you're a dog walker, like, lots of people create proposals. And so they could have gone after everyone, or they could have gotten like, super, or they could have gone like super like use case specific, but still had a lot of different target users. I think the benefit of choosing a niche, but also understanding that you're choosing that niche because of what's unique around how they are going to use your product, is it allows you to not only market more effectively because it really limits the scope of who you're going after initially, but it allows you to make smarter product decisions, right? Because like we all have different workflows. So like ConvertKit's a great example of this. ConvertKit, because they were building for bloggers, it helped them to say no to a lot of features that other competitors had because their users, bloggers, their niche didn't need those. And so I would say I'm not opposed to niches. I'm opposed to choosing niches because there are common attributes as opposed to common ways they're going to use your product that are relevant to marketing and product design. So like definitely for a lot of people, choosing a niche is a smart thing, but it's not because of who they are. It's because of what they're trying to get done.
Makes sense. Now I understood it. I disagreed initially on your tweet.
Yeah.
So that's all from my side. Kate, where can people find you? And what about this Trigger Tuesday that I'm also about to buy as well?
So people can find me on Twitter. I hang out there. I love it there. You'll see a link as well on my Twitter profile to join my newsletter. And we've got a great newsletter that helps people to understand the buyer psychology behind why people buy. So those will be the best places to hang out and reach out and say hi. I'm really active on Twitter. So if you have questions following this podcast that you want answered, just hit me up and I'll try to respond quickly. I do have a newborn, so I know that you do too. So I'm not always as responsive as I'd like to be, but I will definitely try. And with if you're on the newsletter, then you'll also find out when we launch the new Trigger Technique offer at the end of the month. So the end of November. So that's the best places to be.
Yeah. So I actually have around 100 plus newsletter on my list. I don't read all of them, but I have them. And like yours one is like one of the one I really look forward to because it just revises my psychological concepts that I can actually practically apply. In fact, I wanted to launch the same newsletter and then I saw yours. I said, okay, there's one working already. I don't need to launch another.
You should still do it and find your own angle, right? Like maybe all of your examples are going to be specific to parents. Like, I don't know. Like I'm not the only one. Like once I started doing all this stuff on like cognitive biases and like understanding buyer psychology, of course, once you start doing something, then you start to realize there's this whole landscape of awesome people that are kind of like doing things in the same tangent. So like do it and just find your own hook for it.
Yeah, if I get a bandwidth for sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the show today.
This is Growth Marketing Story with your host, and he goes by Azashai. Come learn from the mindset of growth marketers. This is Growth Marketing Story with your host.